Ringo Starr's trembling voice echoed across the stage as he fought back tears on his 85th birthday. A moment meant for celebration that instead became a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile even legends can be. Fans around the globe watched in stunned silence when the Beatles' beloved drummer, known for his carefree grin and steady rhythm, broke down during his annual Peace and Love toast. Mere hours earlier, he'd canceled shows in Philadelphia and New York, citing what seemed like a routine illness. Doctors ordered rest, but something far deeper weighed on his heart. For the first time ever, Ringo publicly mourned his fallen bandmates John and George, his voice cracking under the weight of 50 years of memories and loss. In that moment, the world realized that the last surviving Beatle carries more than just the legacy of a band. He carries the echoes of a brotherhood that was once unbreakable. But how did a boy named Richard Starkey, born July 7, 1940, on a crumbling wartime street in Liverpool, transform into the effervescent character the world adored? Imagine a city where German bombs rattled windows every night, where children learned to flinch at the whistle of a distant siren. Richard's father, a baker named Richard Sr., tried to shield his family from the terror. His mother, Elsie, scrubbed floors by day and tended bar at night just to keep a roof overhead. When Richard was only 3, his father vanished, leaving his mother to face air raids and eviction notices on her own. Neighbors whispered that a broken marriage and the relentless pressure of war drove him away. But for little Richard, the loss was simply another jolt in a life already fraught with uncertainty. At age 6, Richard faced his first brush with mortality. An appendix burst, triggering a raging infection called peritonitis that plunged him into a coma lasting days. Doctors fought to keep him alive as bombs fell above, and Elsie spent every vigil in that sterile hospital waiting room. Nearly a full year passed before young Richard emerged, 8 years old, frail, unable to read or count. Yet rather than quiver with fear or bitterness, he accepted his new struggles with a quiet resolve. Tutors arrived to help him catch up, but those years of isolation and the sleepless nights haunted by nightmares shaped a resilience he would later channel into the decisive beats that made him a legend. Just when it seemed Richard might find steady footing, tuberculosis struck in 1953. He was shipped off to a sanatorium for 2 long years. No school, no friends, only the echo of his own thoughts and the chill of sterile hallways. It was in that antiseptic gloom that a gentle nurse handed him a mallet and suggested he tap its head against a metal cabinet, simply to pass the hours. The dull clang resonated through the empty wing, igniting a spark of joy he hadn't known he was missing. When another attendant slipped him a record called Bedtime for Drums, his heart soared to rhythms he'd never imagined. For the first time, Richard felt an ownership over sound, as if in each drumbeat he reclaimed a piece of life stolen by illness. By 16, the boy who once lay in a coma was apprenticed as a machinist in a factory, yet his mind raced toward music. Nights found him in a dingy basement with coworkers Roy Trafford and Eddie Miles, hammering out skiffle tunes that blended jazz, folk, and blues. Those basement sessions, fueled by dreams of escape and the clatter of machinery above, became his sanctuary. That Christmas, his stepfather presented him with a battered drum kit, and 2 months later, Richard performed his first real show at the Cavern Club on July 31, 1957. The crowd's cheers felt like an exhale after years of barely breathing, and Richard, now Ringo Starr, knew he had found his purpose. Ringo's early career was turbulent but transformative. He joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, adopted a flamboyant persona complete with rings on every finger and a star painted on his drum head, and played marathon sets in Liverpool's clubs. When opportunity knocked through a fateful Hamburg booking in October 1960, he endured nights of near-constant playing, delirious exhaustion, and the kind of chaos most teenagers could never imagine. Arrests, deportations, and the ever-present threat of violence in those red-light districts tested his spirit. Yet amid the haze of drunken debauchery and raw energy, Ringo found the groove that would later define the Beatles' sound. Fast forward to February 1962, when the Beatles' Pete Best missed a show and Ringo stepped in. George Harrison recalled that moment as electric, insisting, "This is it." Within weeks, Ringo officially joined the band, but not without a storm of controversy. Fans protested, George took a headbutt for his trouble, and Ringo wondered if swapping one group's storms for another's would be worth the cost. Abbey Road studio doors didn't immediately swing open with golden welcome. Producer George Martin plucked him off drums for one session, relegating him to tambourine until Ringo could prove his mettle. Through pranks, hidden gear, and relentless pressure, Ringo persevered, his left-hand logic on a right-hand kit forging the heartbeat of songs like Love Me Do and Please Please Me. Decades later, that same rhythm carries him forward as he faces new fights. His health, his memories, and the gaping emptiness left by his brothers in music. His 85th birthday tribute, once a lighthearted tradition, has transformed into a solemn global memorial. NASA even helped beam his peace and love message to the moon and back, acknowledging that while his physical body has weathered countless storms, his spirit fuels hope across generations. Yet beneath every calculated beat, every witty quip captured on film, lies the poignant reminder that time spares no one. Yet beneath every calculated beat, every infectious laugh captured on film, Ringo Starr has known more loss than most could bear. After the world watched his tribute beam across space, grief cut deeper inside him than any stage light could ever illuminate. The death of John Lennon in 1980 shocked him to the core, a memory seared by a sudden end to their brotherhood and thousands of notes left unsung. Less than 2 decades later, he mourned George Harrison, whose gentle spirit slipped away into silent chords and unfinished solos. These tragedies reshaped his path, forcing him to discover life beyond the band that defined his youth. In the wake of those losses, Ringo channeled sorrow into his art, producing solo albums that matched raw emotion with melodic craftsmanship. He found solace behind the drum kit and the microphone, collaborating with legends like Peter Frampton, Elton John, and Mark Hudson. Hits like It Don't Come Easy and Photograph skyrocketed to #1, but every applause and sold-out show felt bittersweet. Cheers melted into a hollow sound when his mind's eye saw empty seats beside him where John and George once sat, listening to his rhythms as bandmates and friends. Yet Ringo refused to play a victim. He persevered through personal storms that ranged from broken relationships to public legal battles over Beatles royalties. Despite the civil suits and headline-grabbing disputes that left him questioning the fairness of fame, he maintained a gentle humor that disarmed critics and drew admiration. When his ex-wife sued for greater support, he quietly increased payments out of generosity rather than ego. When his company faced collapse, he pivoted toward painting and spin art installations that raised millions. For cancer research and addiction recovery, creativity became both his livelihood and his therapy. Even as the years marched on, the world never tired of calling him the last Beatle, a title that weighed heavily on his soul. He welcomed the recognition but bristled at the loneliness it implied. Each year, fans flocked to honor his annual Peace and Love moment, a tradition he began in 2008 to celebrate joy instead of headlines. But with every new country added to the global ceremony, his humble toast felt more like a vigil. On the surface, candles and laughter. Beneath the surface, memories of laughter shared with 3 inseparable friends who, one by one, had stepped into the shadows he still cast in their honor. His health battles mirrored the emotional battles he faced. Diagnosed with heart issues and bouts of viral infections, he has canceled tours and hospital runs more often than he'd admit. In 2014, an intestinal blockage forced him to postpone shows, and his 2019 retirement rumors surfaced after bouts of shingles immobilized him. Yet each time, he bounced back on his stages worldwide, drumming with the all-star band and reminding crowds that mortality might slow an 85-year-old man, but could never still his rhythm. Standing behind the kit, his posture straight, grin unwavering, he defied both the calendar and his own body's warnings. Contrast fills Ringo's legacy like a powerful track layered with countermelodies. He is the boy who lay unconscious in a hospital ward, yet he became the voice of celebration for millions. He is the man who tasted bitter discord in courtrooms, yet he poured love into his charity and his children. He is the musician who felt invisible in the world's greatest band, yet his awkward left-handed flair became the heartbeat of global hits. Each paradox pushed him further into forging an identity so unique that centuries from now, historians will still study his journey. Today, as he sits in his sprawling Los Angeles home, surrounded by platinum records and philanthropic awards, he ponders the next chapter. Will he trade drumsticks for memoirs? Will unfinished songs lie dormant in vaults, waiting for listeners to connect the last missing notes? Or will he surprise the world again, appearing on late-night stages to play that signature intro to With a Little Help from My Friends? Whatever he chooses, fans know one thing. The man who once tapped out childhood rhythms in a lonely hospital wing refuses to let his heart fall silent. Recently, his canceled shows and visible tears reminded everyone that Ringo Starr, despite decades of triumph, remains achingly human. Behind his iconic drums and cheerful quips lies a heart shaped by joy and sorrow. That annual peace and love moment has grown into a global prayer for unity, echoing the Beatles' message through time. As he faces each sunrise, his steady beat carries both remembrance and hope into the unknown. Now, as Ringo Starr contemplates the next chapter of his remarkable life, he stands between two worlds: the unrelenting fame that has followed him since the early 60s and the quiet solitude he craves now more than ever. He still remembers the first time he heard his own voice crack on that 85th birthday livestream, an unfiltered moment of vulnerability that spread across millions of screens. Critics praised his bravery, but only Ringo knows how that tremor in his tone echoed decades of hidden scars. The man who once tapped out secret rhythms on a hospital cabinet mallet no longer needs to hide his heartbeat. Now it resonates openly, echoing a life packed with triumphs and tragedies. He spends his mornings in a sunlit studio filled with drum kits, guitars, and half-finished recordings. Each instrument tells a story: a snare drum dented by a furious touring schedule, a guitar once strung by George Harrison's careful fingers, a tambourine that survived the chaos of Hamburg's darkest nights. A faint smile crosses his lips as he picks up a pair of drumsticks, lighter than he remembers, but still able to summon that childhood spark. When he sets them down, he reaches for a notebook filled with song ideas scribbled in uneven handwriting. These new songs carry the weight of loss and the anticipation of renewal, blending country twang with Beatles K harmonies, a nod to his upcoming album with T-Bone Burnett. Though whispers in the music industry suggested Ringo might finally retire, he repeatedly dismissed them with a characteristic grin. "My kids are fed up with that line, you know." His family, 3 adult children who cherish their father's enduring warmth, often reminds him that legacy is not measured in endless performances, but in stories passed down through generations. On weekends, he hosts backyard barbecues at his Los Angeles home, inviting old friends and 3-star chefs alike, regaling them with tales from the Cavern Club or the Bahamas shoot gone wrong. Laughter and gentle ribbing provide a balm for old wounds, reminding him that healing can come through shared memories rather than solitary reflection. Yet not all battles have a soundtrack of good humor. Just months ago, the Pandora Papers cast a long shadow over his charitable endeavors, suggesting that his offshore trusts might intersect with his Lotus Foundation's millions raised for cancer research. The headlines posed uncomfortable questions. Is your donation funding tax shelters? Ringo remained publicly silent, letting his art and his annual Peace and Love address speak for him. Underneath the surface, he spent nights in meetings with financial advisors restructuring the trusts to ensure full transparency and to restore faith in every penny he raised. That response, far from a PR stunt, was a heartfelt commitment to protect the very causes he championed. Contrast framing has always been central to Ringo's story, and never more starkly than now. Here is a man who once wept on stage while suspending tour dates for his health. Yet he now pilots art shows that spin Rolls-Royce engines into whirling canvases of color. Here is a drummer who struggled to read and count at age 8, yet today analyzes complex financial charts to safeguard his philanthropic legacy. Through every twist, be it courtroom drama over Beatles royalties, the humiliation of seeing another drummer behind his kit, or the physical frailty of an octogenarian, Ringo has remained true to one principle: keep moving forward. Listeners tuning in to his new country-infused album will hear more than catchy hooks. They will feel the texture of decades spent both in the limelight and behind hospital doors. Album tracks like Empty Stage, Full Heart, paint vivid portraits of a man who returns to a silent arena, recalling chants of Ringo forever, fading into the hush of empty seats. Songs such as Trust Fund Blues confront the vulnerability of public life, describing legal battles and metaphors of broken drumheads and rattling chains. The storytelling is cinematic, rooted in the same authenticity that brought tears to fans' eyes on his milestone birthday. Strategically, Ringo has embraced limited live performances for this album's launch, an intentional move to make each event feel like an exclusive communion rather than a routine gig. Invitations will be sent to fan club veterans who've attended every Peace and Love ceremony since 2008, along with a handful of social media followers selected by random draw. By weaving in FOMO, fear of missing out, he ensures that each performance becomes a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a reflection of the Beatles' cherished, never-to-be-repeated magic. Visuals for these shows carry an intimate documentary style, soft lighting, close-up camera pans on his hands as they drum gentle brushes across the snare. Between songs, Ringo shares short anecdotes about songwriting inspirations, like discovering a discarded lyric sheet in an old Plymouth record store or finding solace in the hush of a Swiss chalet after a fall tour. These personal touches invite audiences into his world, breaking down the barrier between icon and individual. When he pauses mid-story, letting the silence resonate, viewers lean in, sensing the weight of history carried in that quiet breath. Throughout it all, Ringo Starr's tone remains unmistakably his own, warm, self-deprecating, undimmed by the glare of notoriety. He speaks in short, assured sentences, punctuated with a chuckle that conveys both humility and defiance. His language reflects a lifetime of adapting, from staccato bursts in his youth to longer, reflective passages now that he can share the full arc of his journey. The structure of his shows follows the classic rise and fall narrative, opening with energetic drumming, drifting into soulful ballads, then building again to a euphoric finale where every fan chants along to "With a Little Help from My Friends." This blueprint echoes the competitor's storytelling approach, but refines it. It balances raw emotion with triumph, interweaving personal struggle with purposeful action. By focusing on Ringo's present creativity, new songs, art installations, philanthropic turnaround, rather than only revisiting past glories, the narrative stays fresh and forward-looking. The audience feels that they aren't merely consuming nostalgia. They're witnessing the evolution of a legend who refuses to stand still. The camera's panned in tight on Ringo's lined face as the world watched him struggle through that fateful peace and love moment. An image replayed across news networks and shared in millions of online feeds. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag Ringo Starr and hashtag Last Beatle trended worldwide, with fans speculating on his health, his grief, and what this emotional display might mean for his future. Comments poured in. Is he retiring? One tweet read. He needs our prayers, lamented another. A viral TikTok stitched clips of Beatles-era highlights against slices of his tearful speech, contrasting his lithe, carefree youth with the stooped, fragile figure now pleading for understanding. Journalists seized on every nuance, his quivering voice, the tremor in his hands, the steady gaze that momentarily faltered, and turned basic questions into front-page drama. Suddenly, Ringo Starr was no longer just a rock legend. He was a symbol of vulnerability in an age where icons are expected to remain immortal. As the dust settled on the initial shock, Ringo's team moved swiftly to shape the narrative, releasing a short behind-the-scenes video that showcased him practicing drums in his Los Angeles studio just days before his birthday. The footage was candid, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, careful footwork on the bass drum pedal, a resolute smile as he tapped out a gentle groove. Interspersed with shots of him signing vinyl for a small group of fans, the clip reminded viewers of the man's enduring passion for rhythm. That strategic reveal reframed the conversation, not around decline, but around persistence. Fans who'd feared the worst now celebrated his resilience, rallying to buy tickets to upcoming shows and pre-order his forthcoming album. By balancing candid vulnerability with images of strength, the team reignited excitement and quelled whispers of permanent retirement. This dance between fragility and fortitude has defined Ringo's modern era. His annual Peace and Love ceremony, once a modest gathering of 100 fans in Chicago, has blossomed into a global event spanning over 30 countries. On the same day Ringo wept, thousands lit candles in city plazas from Tokyo to Toronto, each flame symbolizing solidarity with the last Beatle. In London's Trafalgar Square, a crowd of devoted enthusiasts sang Yellow Submarine in unison, their voices echoing against centuries-old facades. Yet the core of the ritual remains intensely intimate. Small groups huddle in town halls or private living rooms, raising glasses in quiet tribute. This blend of mass and micro gatherings taps into FOMO. No one wants to miss their chance to stand beside a friend in an instant of collective remembrance. Through that delicate tension, Ringo's team ensures each ceremony feels simultaneously timeless and gorgeously personal. Behind the scenes, however, the Pandora Papers scandal cast a shadow over these uplifting tributes. For weeks, financial columns dissected his offshore holdings, questioning whether the same funds raised for cancer research were being sheltered from taxation. Ringo's initial silence only fanned the flames of suspicion, leading to intense scrutiny from philanthropic watchdogs. Determined to safeguard his reputation, he convened a midnight meeting with legal and financial advisors, poring over trust documents by the lamplight. Already the trusts had been restructured to create transparent, audited channels. Now Ringo personally filmed a concise explainer video detailing each step, from initial funding sources to final charitable disbursements. His calm, deliberate narration underscored a simple message: integrity matters more than optics. When the follow-up clip went live, commentators shifted from doubt to admiration, praising the former Beatle for owning the conversation rather than letting it define him. Meanwhile, Ringo's creativity has turned inward, fusing decades of memories into compelling new work. He recently transformed his home sunroom into a lyrical workshop, walls plastered with photos of his childhood street in Liverpool, sketches of drum patterns, and pressed flower bouquets from his first wife, Mourning. There, he experiments with melodies that weave together steel guitars, vintage mellotrons, and the occasional sitar, nods to the Beatles' exploratory past. Late-night recordings capture his voice cracking with genuine emotion as he sings lines like, "Time may dim the brightest star / but love's echo travels far." He collaborates remotely with T-Bone Burnett, exchanging voice notes on encrypted apps and debating the perfect reverb settings for an acoustic breakdown. These sessions yield raw, unpolished tracks that Ringo treasures more than any studio-polished single, because they capture the unguarded spirit behind his recent on-stage vulnerability. Even as his fans clamor for more glimpses behind the curtain, Ringo remains mindful of privacy's power. He has declined numerous documentary offers that promise deep, dark truths, instead planning a memoir that he'll unveil chapter by chapter through a dedicated podcast. Each installment will run 15 minutes, short enough to feel like a conversation, long enough to dive into a single thematic story: his wartime childhood, his first heartbreak, the pang of being heckled after joining the Beatles, the manic euphoria of Beatlemania, the anguish of legal betrayals, and the bittersweet solace of philanthropy. By pacing the podcast alongside his album release schedule, he creates a multi-sensory tapestry that keeps audiences engaged for months, ensuring FOMO extends beyond a single video or song to an entire narrative arc. As section headlines are teased, Cavern Club Breakdown, Hospital Hymns, Taxis and Time Machines, fans share anticipation clips and countdowns on their socials. The result? A global community that experiences Ringo's journey not as distant spectators, but as participants in a living legend's final great adventure. When the first chapter drops, listeners will hear Ringo say, "I wrote this for the kid who tapped on that cabinet, because that kid deserves to be heard." In those words lies the promise. This is not just a memoir, it's a reclamation of a lifetime. And just as the word spread when he canceled his shows, so too will the world rally when they realize that Ringo Starr is still writing the soundtrack to his own legend. Ringo's strategic rollout did not stop at music and memoirs. Recognizing the power of scarcity, his team launched a series of ultra-limited collectible items tied to each chapter of his unfolding story. The first drop, a numbered run of 500 Peace and Love enamel pins, sold out in 20 minutes, with buyers sharing unboxing videos as proof of their status. Next came Rhythms of Resilience drumstick pairs, each hand signed by Ringo and accompanied by a snippet of a previously unreleased solo take from his new album. Fans who secured these rare artifacts gained access to an exclusive Discord community where Ringo would occasionally pop in to answer questions in real time, a gesture that cemented the intimate bond he cultivated through vulnerability. He also formed strategic partnerships that reinforced his narrative. A collaboration with an artisanal bourbon distillery produced Abbey Road Rye, a 12-year-old bourbon whose label artwork featured stylized drum patterns and Liverpool street signs. A percentage of each bottle's sales supported music therapy programs in hospitals, and homage to the mallet-on-metal exercises that first inspired young Richard during his long convalescence. The limited edition run sold out at launch, bridging fans' desire for unique memorabilia with Ringo's underlying theme of healing through rhythm. Digital platforms became another arena for deepening engagement. Ringo's team cleverly leveraged ephemeral content on platforms like Instagram Stories and Snapchat, sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of late-night songwriting sessions. But they peppered these peaks with cryptic countdown timers and partial lyric blurbs, inviting speculation and heightening anticipation. A 15-second clip of Ringo tapping out a new beat, paired with the text #Chapter 5 lands Friday, ignited thousands of fan theories about the song's meaning and fueled trending hashtags that drew in casual observers who might otherwise scroll past. Meanwhile, YouTube played a central role in building FOMO. Instead of static video releases, Ringo's channel segmented long-form interviews into episodes that functioned like a serialized documentary. Each episode ended on a mini cliffhanger, perhaps the revelation of a childhood memory or a cryptic question about his next creative move. Comment sections lit up with fans pledging loyalty, sharing personal anecdotes of how Ringo's drumming had inspired them, and debating which story nugget might surface next. At the end of each video, a CTA, join the Peace and Love Collective for early access and hidden extras, directed viewers to a subscription portal that promised early listens and uncut interview segments. Beyond digital and physical drops, Ringo harnessed the power of live pop-up experiences. A Drum in the Dingle art installation in Liverpool invited fans to play a custom-built drum set positioned at the site of his childhood home. Nearby panels displayed archival photos, audio clips, and quotes mapped to specific beats in his early recordings. Workshops led by local musicians taught attendees how to replicate Ringo's distinctive left-handed drumming technique, fostering hands-on appreciation for his unique approach. Each session ended with a communal drumming circle where participants shared their own stories of overcoming adversity, echoing Ringo's lifelong message that rhythm can heal. These multi-channel activations converged at the last Beatles' Unbroken tour, a carefully curated series of 10 intimate venues across North America and Europe. Rather than booking massive arenas, Ringo opted for historic theaters and jazz clubs seating no more than 1,500 people. Ticket packages included a vinyl copy of his upcoming album, a digital voucher for the Memoir podcast series, and a chance to join the pre-show soundcheck via livestream. The scarcity of seats and the promise of a multi-sensory experience sent ticket resale values soaring and cemented the tour as one of the year's most coveted events. At each stop, the stage design reinforced the narrative arc. Broken drumheads framed by fractured mirrors symbolized the shards of Ringo's past. A backdrop of shifting colors evoked both wartime Liverpool skies and the psychedelic haze of the 1960s. And a single spotlight followed Ringo as he delivered heartfelt monologues between songs. He recounted childhood stories in his own voice, balancing self-deprecating humor with raw honesty. When he paused, head bowed, fans sensed the gravity of the moment and leaned in as one. Proof that the interplay of music and story remained as potent today as ever. Critics who once lamented that rock music had lost its depth praised Ringo's approach for reintroducing narrative into performance. Rolling Stone called it a masterclass in legacy management, while NPR praised his genuine commitment to artistry over mere nostalgia. Social media influencers captured the emotional highlights: Ringo's tears after a heartfelt rendition of a new ballad, the spontaneous audience drumming alongside him, and his warm embrace of a young fan in tears. Those moments, shared across TikTok and Instagram Reels, multiplied, spreading his message far beyond ticket holders and reaching viewers who might never step foot in a theater. As the tour progressed, the underlying theme crystallized. Ringo Starr is not defined by the Beatles, nor solely by his own triumphs and tragedies. He is defined by his unbroken will to create, to connect, and to inspire. Each promotional tactic, limited collectibles, digital exclusives, immersive pop-ups, intimate performances, served a single purpose: to bring people closer to the heartbeat behind the legend. The orchestrated sense of urgency and exclusivity didn't dilute his authenticity. It amplified it, reminding fans that rarity and vulnerability can coexist in the modern attention economy. By the time the final notes rang out in a sold-out theater in Paris, the legacy Ringo had spent decades forging took on a new dimension. No longer was he simply the drummer who kept time for the world's most famous band. He was a storyteller, a philanthropist, and an innovator in legacy marketing. His latest album climbed the charts. The Memoir podcast attracted millions of downloads, and a flood of fan-generated content ensured that his narrative would circulate long after the tour engines cooled. By the final bow of the last Beatles' unbroken tour, a hush fell over the audience as Ringo Starr lowered his drumsticks. The stage lights dimmed, leaving him silhouetted against a backdrop that pulsed with memories. He paused for a heartbeat, scanning faces that shimmered with admiration and tears. In that electric silence, every fan felt the weight of 5 decades of rhythm, heartbreak, and hope. His left hand rose in small salute, a subtle gesture loaded with meaning for anyone who remembers his earliest hospital beats. Then he struck a single, deliberate tap on the snare, and the audience erupted in cheers. That one beat echoed the core message he carried through every chapter. Even when life fractures you, your true rhythm can heal and unite. After the final curtain fell, the conversation didn't end. Social media feeds lit up with clips of his final drum stroke, each retweeted thousands of times within minutes. Podcasters dissected every nuance of his salute. Art critics praised the emotional resonance of his broken drumhead installation, and charity forums hailed the success of his funding for music therapy. Meanwhile, streaming platforms reported spikes in streams of peace and love ceremonies, while pre-orders for his book and album soared. That digital echo chamber ensured that Ringo's influence would continue to reverberate far beyond the theaters, reminding every new audience that the beat goes on. His team tracked these engagements in real time, refining strategies to deepen each fan's personal connection with the man behind the legend. Ringo's enduring appeal rests on a delicate balance of nostalgia and innovation. He knows that fans cherish the Beatles' timeless classics, yet he refuses to remain a mere curio of the past. Instead, he weaves archival footage of cavern club crowds into futuristic AR experiences that transport audiences to 1960s Liverpool in real time. He collaborates with VR developers to let younger generations sit virtually in his studio, playing alongside him during live mixing sessions. Even long after the tour buses have driven away, these immersive experiences keep new ears listening and new hearts believing. By blending vintage authenticity with tomorrow's tech, he extends his legacy into landscapes he could once only imagine. It remains truly visionary. Throughout this entire campaign, the narrative structure followed a classic arc of tension and release. Each digital episode introduced a problem, whether it was a health scare, a financial controversy, or an unspoken grief, and then guided us through Ringo's response. Strategic twists, like the reveal of his drum sequence for a philanthropic gala or the teaser for his Memoir podcast, provided peaks of excitement that fans impatiently awaited. Smooth transitions between YouTube, podcasts, social channels, and immersive pop-ups created a seamless journey in which every new revelation felt like unfolding a fresh page of his biography. That integrated approach doesn't just drive numbers, it builds emotional currency, fostering a bond that transcends age, geography, or musical taste. At its heart, Ringo Starr's journey demonstrates that authenticity and strategy can coexist. Fans sensed the raw emotions behind his tearful salute, but they also appreciated the polished precision of his modern releases. They connected with the vulnerability of a septuagenarian legend who openly mourns his brothers, Yet they admired the savvy orchestration of limited drops, VR sessions, and global ceremonies. Each element reinforced another, forming a mosaic that celebrated both his storied past and his ongoing evolution. Rather than relying solely on nostalgia, he invited audiences to participate in creating new memories, whether by joining a drumming circle in Liverpool or contributing to a leukemia charity through NFT art auctions on his platform. The result is a living legacy that not only endures but also adapts. As marketers and storytellers dissect this campaign, they will note how each phase balances emotional intensity with strategic pacing. A well-timed health update built suspense before releasing archival footage that soothed worries. A sudden reveal of T-Bone Burnett collaborations stoked anticipation for the album, while a quietly released behind-the-scenes clip fostered trust. By structuring each release like the peaks and valleys of a classic Beatles track, he kept engagement high without exhausting his audience. Every beat mattered, every pause carried meaning. That methodical yet heartfelt approach transformed what could have been a routine comeback into a case study in modern legacy management. Today, as global eyes remain fixed on his every note and narrative turn, Ringo Starr reaffirms that vulnerability fuels connection and scarcity drives devotion. The boy who tapped mallets in a silent ward became the man whose rhythm still moves millions. His story reminds us that every final beat can be a new beginning if we dare to listen. And in that silence, we find hope.